What's up, everybody? I'm Brett Pape. That's Coach Bruce. And this is the Coach Approach.
Stay on.
Good to see you, brother. How you feeling, man? I saw roughly, I think it was like 45 minutes after the show last week. And it was a show, I must tell you, that you sounded like shit the entire time, coughing. And when you told me you had COVID, I was, A, two things, concerned for your well-being, and B, not very shocked. How you feeling, man?
Feeling good, man. I appreciate that. It literally just today woke up and felt like I had my voice back. The congestion up top is finally, going away. And I don't feel like I just want to sleep all day anymore. And so I feel like I'm revived. I'm getting back to normal. So fired up, ready to go for tonight, man.
Man, that's awesome. That's good to hear. My wife had it, and she kind of went through it for about a week or so. And like you said, about wanting to sleep all the time. But thankfully, both you and her got out of it not much more than a pretty bad flu. So I guess it's time for us to move on. We're up to week 14. Before we get started, I didn't think anyone outside of my family or yours was tuning in, but I say that only because we now have some sponsors that we need to kind of thank and kind of tell a little bit about it. So we're going to get right into our first one, and that is Better Fantasy. This episode of the Cut Podcast Network is sponsored by Better Fantasy. That's BETTOR Fantasy. Better Fantasy is a new free-to-play app that lets you sync your fantasy football league and bet on the matchups. You can cash out for gift cards when your bets hit and even help raise money for charity along the way. Brand new company looking to grow their early adopter community. Slick app and fun to use. One of the reasons we love it is they also offer prop betting. So if you're in a state that hasn't legalized gambling yet, you can get in some prop bets on Better Fantasy. Totally free to play. Download today for iPhone and Android. This is the important part, use the code THECUT when you create your account to receive 1,000 Better credits when you start your account. Thank you to Better Fantasy for sponsoring this episode. Well, there you go, Coach Bruce. I say we jump on it.
Well done.
I mean, that's really what I need right now. I need to have another hobby and another place where I can invest time, because I'll tell you, 37 fantasy teams isn't enough. So I'm going to run out as soon as we're done later on tonight.
Hey, we are, between the two of us, we are over 70 fantasy teams deep annually. So we have a little bit of experience in the fantasy space at this point.
We do, but I now have enough experience to know that I have enough fantasy teams. And I promise you, I don't know what, you and I are going to have some sort of wager come January. And the wager is going to be based off of something we each have to do if we decide to join a new dynasty league. I have made a promise. I'm not doing any more new dynasty. I will do new redraft because it is not a lifelong commitment. And I feel like it's fun. Yeah. So we're going to come up with something just to hold us on the fact that we're both committed to not joining any more new dynasty leagues.
I think you just like the whole idea of just being one and done. Getting it out. You do well, great. Let's start over again next season. And
Yeah.
If guys want to duck out, they don't want to be in there for the long haul. That's what the redraft is all about. You find somebody else to throw in if somebody leaves. But I'm like you, man. I was a redraft guy for so many years, like most of us. And, Dynasty wasn't,
I wasn't though, and I hate to interject. I wasn't. I didn't start redraft until last year. I've always been a one league dynasty, home league type of thing since 1994. So the redraft, that's part of why I want to be okay with accepting more of those, because it is a different strategy. It is not about the future. It is about now. And my whole mind frame of value in dynasty, it's a whole different approach.
Yeah, I love playing dynasty, and you might have had this conversation. There's, my home leagues are redraft. It's hard to get friends and family you've done leagues with for years to change and want to go dynasty. So those things are fun because it's a new start every year. Sometimes there's a friend or two that wasn't in it last year that wants to get in it this year. And so there's some fun and some benefit to that. And like you said, if it's a league you want to get out of, you can. But dynasty is so much fun. If you get the right guys and it's competitive, and there's a lot of trades. And I think that's the difference between dynasty and redrafts. And dynasty, all of a sudden you're like, dude, there are trades going on during the draft, whereas most redraft leagues for years, it was like everybody just had your spot, you picked your team, and then you played the waiver wire, and you hopefully made some trades during the season. But in dynasty, I mean, it's as soon as that league is created and the draft order goes, everything's fair game. I mean, it's absolutely –
it's nonstop. It is nonstop.
Yeah, I love it. I had 2 trades this week where I got David Montgomery, and I traded a first and a second to get David Montgomery. And teams, I'm in win now, have a chance to win a championship. He's 24 years old. He's seeing the volume. He's a guy for the next, 8-9 years could be a workhorse. And, I was fortunate enough to find a couple guys in teams that I'm, 10-2 and doing really, really well in those leagues. And now I just added David Montgomery to those 2 teams for the playoff push. So that's what makes Dynasty a lot of fun. You see some of that in redraft too, but you're not trading draft picks, right? Because there's no draft.
Right.
The draft is all over.
It's funny you just brought up. I just made a big, along with my home league, there's been a sister league that some of the guys in my home league have been in for the same amount of time that our home league has been, since 1994. There's been a second league, but that has always had a $500 buy-in. It gets pretty pricey. And the amount of money that you end up taking home at the end of the season could be up to $5,000. And it's so hard to get in. Well, we finally, me and 2 other guys from my home league, we're going to be co-owners. We finally got in this year. And we're in a total rebuild. We had no picks, but last week we were able to get DeAndre Swift, and we gave up a late first next year and a second in 23. And it felt like stealing. Yeah.
I love that stuff. That's what makes it so much fun is, first of all, I'm a big guy. I think Kevin at the Boy is one of our favorite guys. He's also part of the cut. But he was talking about how posted a tweet today that said any dynasty league should never have the trade deadline turned on. Like it should be free trade all the way through. That's what we do. There's draft picks you can trade away. You're always thinking about the next season if you didn't get into the tournament. If you got in the playoffs, you're trying to make your roster better throughout the playoffs. As long as they're fair and even trades, there should never be a trade deadline. What's funny is so leagues I'm in, they still have trade deadlines, and I hate it.
Right? No, I mean all of them for me.
Yeah,
I'm not in a dynasty league. I'm not in any league where there's not a trade deadline. And here's the issue that I have with it, and this comes up a lot in my home league because first we're all very competitive. And and you as a coach could probably relate to my competitiveness sometimes means that I'm kind, but I get my point across sometimes when it relates to fantasy football in that home league. I'm getting better, but I digress. My point is that I'm of the opinion, if you're in the league with someone, you should trust that anything they're doing is for the betterment of their team.
Right.
You're not there is no such thing, in my opinion, no such thing as collusion until it actually happens. And I feel like you limit so much of the game by making so many attempts or whatever you want to call it to prevent that from happening where why can't we just trust each other, especially in a home league that's been together for 25 years?
No, and I think that's part of so much what makes fantasy football fun. Like I've got a bunch of, I just started doing content, prior to this season. It was the first time I did my own rankings and my consensus rankings and Project 32 and really got my name out there in the Twitter space. And what's really neat is through that, you end up, and then of course, going to the expo, you meet a bunch of people and all of a sudden you decide to do leagues with these guys. And these are analysts that have been around for a long time, have way more followers than I do. And what's so great about these leagues is there's people DMing you in the league and saying, hey, I want to trade, I want to get Michael Gallup from you. And they're looking at next year, if he gets traded, where's he going to go?
Right.
Is he going to be an alpha? And you're always looking a year, 2, 3 years ahead, trying to get your roster younger. There's so many ways and strategies that there's no, one size fits all. And I think that's the great thing about playing fantasy football. When you get in a league with a bunch of guys that really know what they're doing, the trade talks are absolutely a blast. And even though you may not get a deal done, they're still fun. Like I've had a couple people on Twitter that we both know really well. We can't get a trade done between the two of us, and it's become a comedy act now. It's like one of these days I'm going to get to trade with you. And it's not because you don't like the offer necessarily. It's like, hey, I don't feel like it's puts me where I want to be.
Well, that's funny that you say that because in the leagues where I am with other analysts or in the leagues where I'm in other people from the Twitter community, trading it's not always easy.
Yeah.
And it's also not very easy. I find it very difficult to do so in my home leagues because there's such a variance in what I think valuable is in Dynasty and what they think is. And so it doesn't matter that I can show them a calculator or I can just say, I think you're way off. I'm not going to change their mind. So unless I get an opportunity to get a Swift for a first and a third, I don't get to trade very often because I think there is such a big difference in what people value in home leagues.
Well, and here's the thing too, is first of all, if you're putting your opinions out about players on Twitter, everybody knows what you think. And so if you put something out there about a player that may not line up with somebody else's thinking, like for example, there's a lot of talk right now about Tony Pollard versus Zeke, or Tony Pollard as an alpha potentially, and what his comparables are. And there's a lot of fun there, right? So you may put something out, and someone goes, oh, he doesn't value Tony Pollard like I do. Let me try to make him a trade offer. And then when you start having that conversation with him, like, no. I do value Tony Pollard. There's a difference in what that value is and how we perceive that value. So what's funny is you post something on Twitter and then all of a sudden people want to send you trade offers about that opinion without any context. And it's like, no. Let me add some context to it and tell you where I'm coming from. And then all of a sudden like, oh, okay. And, maybe it's a dead deal or maybe at that point you can make a trade. But it's funny, as soon as you put rankings out or you put consensus rankings out and you're in leagues with some of these guys, trade offers start coming in. Like, oh, sure. He values the player higher than I do. I'm going to rebuild. Maybe I can get him to give me more draft picks than he probably should because I think he values this guy based off the article or the Twitter post he just had. So Twitter becomes a very funny space when it comes to that. So,
but I'll tell you, if someone came to me, I don't post rankings. I don't even put together my own rankings. I feel like I have my own rankings based off of who I trust. And so that's what I use. So if I use it, I feel like I can call my rankings. So if my rankings are such to where I feel like they should be, then when I get an offer that the other guy might think they're going to get more value, if it lines up, that's the best time because we both think we're getting a good deal. And so that is basically everything I base my decisions off now. In Dynasty, redraft's a little different. But Dynasty, man, it's all off of value and making sure it's the right decision to make. And I try not to go with my heart. Or I try not to go with the competitive spirit like I used to. I try and be more businesslike as it relates to trade, so I'm not making decisions that are rash or whatever you want to, call it.
No, and I think we could do an entire show on trade etiquette. I think there's a lot of misconceptions and. Again, trading is not a one-size-fits-all either. It's about understanding the people in your league. And if you understand their personalities and what makes them tick and what doesn't, there's guys I've sent offers to that I felt was a very fair offer. And they'll send something back like, are you freaking kidding me? And then it's like they don't ever want to talk trade with you again. It's like, okay, hold on a second, man. It's an initial offer. I felt like it was fair. Let me explain to you why I felt it was fair, and let's talk through it. If you don't want to counter or you don't want to trade that player, if he's untradeable, just let me know. So sometimes you have to bring it back and go, hey, let me rope you back in. Let me explain to you why the offer was made or why I feel your offer wasn't fair, right? So I think once you understand the people in your league, then that's when trading becomes a lot of fun, because I think a lot of it, I always feel like trades are best done when I send the other player a DM. First of all, I don't like putting trades in the group chat because then everybody wants to play. If I just want to put a player on the trade block, put it in the group chat, let people make offers. But if I'm really specifically looking for somebody, I don't want 3 or 4 other guys trying to get the same guy because I announced it on the group chat. I'll DM that guy directly and say, hey, I noticed you put so-and-so on the trade block. What is your perceived value? And when they come back and say, well, make me an offer. Well, that doesn't help anybody because you put them on the trade block, which tells me you have an idea what you want in return. I want to save us both a lot of time. Let me know what that is. And if I think we can make it work, I'll let you know. And if I don't, I'll say, hey, I feel like we're not on the same page. Best of luck to you. Let's move on. But I feel like if people take the extra time to have those conversations, you can get a lot more trades done in fantasy football.
No, I totally agree. I agree and I don't agree. What I mean when I say that is that for me, the approach that I'm taking now is one where I am I don't take anything personal anymore is what I'm saying. So when somebody comes back to me and says something like kind of what you described, and that being, hey, man, that's a terrible offer. I'm never going to go. Well, I mean, I can't change. I try not to send terrible offers, to be honest. Absolutely. And where in the past, if you don't have a clue or if you don't have a better understanding of value, you might be offended, but I'm not. I think my value is what matters to me. And if you think it's absurd, I would strictly just say, well, I'm sorry you feel that way. Hey, man, good luck the rest of the way. And that's pretty much it. It takes a lot of the emotion out. Hey, Kevin Coleman, we were just talking about the boys. He popped in and we said that he's glad that you're feeling better. And, he kind of liked the haircut. But we should move on. And let's move on and let's talk about some games this week. Kevin's the best. We got some big games this week. And put the records aside. We're going to go right off the bat and talk about your Dallas Cowboys and playing against a team that, I don't know what you think about their new quarterback, but the Washington Redskins, they put a good little stretch together, and that guy's playing pretty well.
I think what's great about the NFL, and if anybody follows me and knows about Project 32 and the breakdown we did on all the teams, it was, at the time it was Ryan Fitzpatrick, right? They made a trade for him. Everybody thinks they're a quarterback away from making a serious run. They won the division last year at 7-9 because that's how bad the NFC least was last year. But I love what Ron Rivera is doing. I love the way he's building the roster. I joke around with people on Twitter all the time as a Cowboys fan, and you have fun with other NFC East fans. But the reality is, before the season started, I felt like it was going to be between the Dallas Cowboys and the Washington football team who was going to win that division. Now, you saw the Eagles put a string of games together. You saw Jalen Hurts, take the next step in terms of what he's done in that offense. He's had some rough games as well. But now here you are. Washington's past the Eagles. They moved into second place. Now they play Dallas. There's 2 games left in the season where they have to play each other. And I'm a big Taylor Heineke. I love the story. I love the guy's grit as an old school football guy. Like, how do you not root for him? Even though he's playing for a competitor, you respect all your opponents. And I think as Cowboy fans, or some of us that they're saying we want Dallas chanting after the last game. It's like, well, yeah, why would you not want a fan base that wants to play the team that's in first place?
Right.
Why are we changing that? Like, I love that. Like, let's play the game. So my take is this. I feel like the game is such a great matchup for both teams. You have a team in the Washington football team. I think have won 4 in a row, if I remember correctly. They're playing really well. Antonio Gibson's now seeing the volume. I think he's explosive at 6'2", 220. He can run between the tackles. He can bounce it outside. He can be a factor in the passing game.
We'll talk about him plenty later with our guests.
Yeah.
So.
But I think what's great, too, is what they're doing offensively. Now, it sucks Logan Thomas is out. You want to see those 2 teams play with all their pieces. And with Dallas, you've got a team that hasn't played well lately, but didn't have Randy Gregory, didn't have DeMarcus Lawrence, didn't have, CeeDee Lamb, who missed a game because of a concussion, and Amari Cooper missed a game,
Right.
games due to COVID. These teams are now finally starting to come together, and they're meeting at the right time. And I think that's going to be a great game. And if Dallas's defense can't control or keep Washington from controlling time of possession, which they've done a great job over the last 4 games, it's going to be a long night for Dallas. But the reality is, I just feel like with Amari Cooper now healthy and CeeDee Lamb healthy, I think this is that game.
Michael Gallup.
Yeah, Michael Gallup. I think now you do have Pollard with the foot, which is an injury that came out just today, and you have Zeke with the knee.
Awesome.
They just signed Ito Smith, and now you've got Corey Clement. If one or two of those guys can't go, that's a big problem for Dallas. But I do think this is where Taylor Heineke, the rubber meets the road. You've got DeMarcus Lawrence back. You got Micah Parsons can play more in space. It's going to be one of those games where if Dallas can move the ball offensively and score first, I think it's going to be tough for Heineke if they have to rely on the passing game. But if they can rely on ball control and Gibson gets going, it's going to be a long night for Dallas. I mean, that's the reality. I think those are two teams I think meeting at the right time.
I think this is definitely a game where, and I know people always say that, who gives a shit about the record? But at the same time, who gives a shit about the record? I think Washington is fun to watch right now. And Taylor is a guy that you can't help but root for. And yeah. I think what I like the most is how his teammates feel about him. If you watch, I don't know which pregame show I was watching. It was probably, they had a primetime game last week on, right? Yeah, they did. And in it, prior to it, they were showing sideline video of not him being interviewed, but his interaction with Taylor. And that was Terry McLaurin just professing not only his love, but his just, hey, man, I believe in you. We all do. And we'll ride and die with you. And it was that's what you want to see in your quarterback position if you're a head football coach and you don't care about fantasy. You want a guy who's going to lead your team. Fantasy-wise, heck, I wish I had him in SF. I mean, I'll plug him in. But real football, I think that, they're okay. They're okay with the guy they have with him in there.
No, I agree 100%. I'll be honest with you. Based on where the Redskins, I keep wanting to say the Redskins, where the Washington football team is going to have to draft in 2022, you're not getting your quarterback of the future in that draft, right? They're going to be middle of the pack. So I think you have Heineke. Who knows what happens to Fitzpatrick with the injury? He's out for the year. I think at this point,
who cares?
But I think the reality is you ride Taylor Heineke for another year and you see what you really have, and then you figure out where you're at in 2023. I think what's funny about the NFC East, and just talking about this matchup, is you have Dallas as the number 4 seed, but winning the division right now, projected as the 4 seed in the playoffs. You have the Washington football team in a playoff spot right now at the season ends today. And guess who the first in team is if somebody drops? The Eagles. You could potentially have 3 teams in the NFC East make the playoffs, which is absolutely crazy if you were to talk about before the season. So I think it's going to be really fun down the stretch to see how the NFC East plays out. But I love this matchup. I mean, this is a great game.
Yeah, it'll be fun. I'm looking forward to it. And I'm looking forward to it for both aspects. I'm looking forward to it for the rivalry and for the game. And I'm looking forward to it in fantasy because I got a lot of guys on the field in that game. So it should be a great watch. Let's go talk about 2 teams that a lot of people preseason, excuse me, feel like they're going to meet in the Super Bowl, and many people probably still do, and that's Buffalo at Tampa Bay.
Hey, look, preseason, when I did Project 32, we did the countdown from 32 to 1. Team 32 was the team I felt was going to be the worst team this year, which was the Houston Texans, and Team 1 was who I would pick to win the Super Bowl, which was Tampa Bay. I have the Buffalo Bills versus Tampa Bay in the Super Bowl in the preseason prediction. This is before the preseason even started, and I think this is that game. Now, I will say I don't know that the Bills are the best team in the AFC right now because they can't get the run game going, and they've had Jonathan Taylor, and you've had New England now, and I can't remember who the other team was, just run roughshod over these guys. When they play an elite running back in a power run game, that defense struggles. So right now, I wouldn't see the Bills being the AFC representative in the Super Bowl, but I think this game is going to have to be that game where you're taking a Tampa Bay team with Tom Brady and all the pieces they have, what they have on defense, returning all 25 starters, if you include the punter, the kicker, and the long snapper. This is now one of those games where you go, hey, Buffalo just lost a tough game in New England. New England's now the number 1 seed in the AFC. And Buffalo at this point needs to make a statement. They need to win Tampa Bay. And if they don't, that team is reeling.
Oh, they're reeling, and I think it's important for Tampa. I think it's a great game. It's also a must-win, and so to speak, for me, for Tampa Bay, because there was a short time last week where it was 20-17 against Atlanta, and you were like, Tom Brady just threw a pick six, and we're kind of going, what's going on in Tampa Bay? Now they rallied, or I shouldn't say they rallied, but they scored a few more times, and it wasn't that big of a deal. But Buffalo is certainly kind of on a downward spiral. So I think it's important for Tampa Bay to win because, A, they're Tampa Bay and Buffalo is not what we thought they were. And B, it's obviously huge for Buffalo. I have been as the biggest Zach Moss, and not the biggest, obviously, if you talk about the girls from Ball Blast and you talk about, I think maybe that's about it. But I have been on Zach Moss from day one. And the reason why I liked him is because I saw him make a lot of plays in the Pac-12. And say what you want about the Pac-12, but he looked to me as someone whose skill set would move on to the NFL. And so many people who I now I didn't know much of anybody back then. So when people were critical of that, I didn't really know how to A, respond, and B, I didn't know what their information was based off. Well, now knowing them, man, there was a lot of reasons why you shouldn't like Zach Moss. But the point is that if they don't get something going back there aside from just Josh Allen, it's going to be kind of a difficult situation for him. In fact, I saw in a recent mock draft, it might have been the cut zone, Christian Williams, because he put out his first earlier this week. But Buffalo's taken probably one of the top backs this year in the first round.
Yeah, I think you have to. I think when you look at the playoffs in the NFL, your defense and your running game have to travel. And I think you're looking at Buffalo right now. That's not a team that's going to host, too many games in the playoffs, even if they win their division. Round 2, they're probably not hosting a game. So I think with Buffalo, and go to the other side is where I was going with it. Tampa Bay right now, if you look at playoff Lenny Fournette has had a phenomenal year. And I was a Ronald Jones guy. I just felt like from a skill set, Ronald Jones just needed to earn the trust of Bruce Arians. But the reality is when Tom Brady speaks and he says, look, I trust Lenny's going to get the volume. And
well, here's the thing, though. I think we were all wrong about Lenny Fournette.
Yeah, we were.
I mean, the guy, I'll tell you what, it wasn't just a Ronald Jones thing. To me, it was more of, yes, he had a contract that was big or whatever. I don't even know if he did. Jacksonville chose to cut him, correct? And if it was because he was a malcontent or whatever, I also felt like his productivity was such that maybe it warranted it. And so I kind of went into it as he's washed up and da-da-da. But he's got more juice. He's been very good for them.
I'll tell you this right now. I'm a huge believer in this and culture and what Tom Brady has brought that organization. Tom Brady, I guarantee you, does what he's done with a lot of players. Had a conversation with Lenny Fournette inside that locker room or on the practice field and said, look, you're my guy. You're the guy that can help us. We need to have a run game. The run game has to travel the playoffs and set everything else up. And Lenny Fournette said, Tom Brady just has that effect. You look at Tom Brady and he calls you out and you go, Tom, I'm not letting you down. And I think that's exactly what's happened with Lenny Fournette. I think it's
happened with now, granted, whatever happened with we don't talk about politics on here, so whatever happened with Antonio Brown and the COVID card, whatever. But aside from that, if it wasn't for a sprained ankle, he was a wide receiver 1 for much of the season. And that's all also strictly because Tom Brady has also gotten in his ear and said, hey, this is the second time I put my reputation on the limb. Let's go. Let's get to work and let's make the best for the team. And I agree that does play a role. But But I think a lot of people, the difference in the two is that a lot of people felt like the skills of Lenny Fournette digressed, and it wasn't simply just a matter of him being a malcontent like Antonio Brown was often referred to as.
Yeah. The reality is this: if you can take 53 guys in a locker room to show up on a Sunday, Monday, Thursday night, whatever night it is they're playing, and you have leadership on that team that you have in Tampa Bay, and someone calls you out and says, look, we're going to make a run. That run's going to have to go through you. You're going to have to play a pivotal role. You've got two choices as a man. You can respond to it, right? And say, I'm going to run through off this guy, or you can make excuses. And Leonard Fournette decided to respond to it. And you look at Ronald Jones and where that's gone the opposite direction. I think he's a talented guy, but did not respond to that conversation the way that Leonard Fournette did. And so I think
the difference in the two. I think the difference in the two is that the criticism was coming from Bruce Arians towards Ronald Jones. I just think that we were wrong. It was Lenny all the time. I think Lenny, you look at the pedigree of the two. What did Lenny do at LSU? The guy might have actually been the guy, and he just didn't like playing in Jacksonville. So whatever. Let's move on quickly because I think there's one more game. And I was excited to see two things last week because a lot of people have talked about how good and how strong the NFC West has been or should be this year. And obviously there's been situations that have happened in both Seattle and San Francisco where they haven't performed like we thought they would. But here we are. We've got LA at Arizona. LA bounced back after kind of not a very impressive performance the week before. And they did come back and get a nice win against Jacksonville. And then Arizona, they got their guy back. Kyler Murray's back. So this is going to be one hell of a game to watch.
I was talking to Kelly Singh. She's been on the show, and she was talking about a trade that she had for Kyler Murray. And, here's the deal. Kyler Murray, to me, that's a guy that's an MVP candidate. He could be the first guy. Now, he's not going to do it this year because of the ankle issues. And I think one of the smartest things that Cliff Kingsbury did this year was hey, look, I love the fact that you can sit in the pocket. You create more time in the pocket. You don't have to run as much as you did last year. Let's make the smart throws. Make the smart play. Let's live for another down. And Kyler Murray's embraced that. And I think what you're seeing with Arizona, it doesn't matter. Colt McCoy had a great run in the games he played in place of Kyler Murray. He kept that team afloat. I think what they're doing defensively and I think what they're doing offensively, what a great job that Cliff Kingsbury has done. And
can I interject? Because there were a lot of people thought he was going to be on the hot seat. And you got to also, here's the situation. I was looking back. I don't know why. Probably had something to do with the recent hire USC just had. But I did a search with me and tweets and USC. And it took me back to when Cliff Kingsbury, he took the job to be the OC at USC after being let go at Texas Tech. And I was thrilled. I thought it was incredible. And then 3 days later, he's hired as the head coach after having a losing record or not the type of career that you would think warranted the promotion to the NFL. But they saw something in his offensive wizardry or whatever you want to call it. But I think it's more than that. I think he's proven to be a pretty good coach, actually.
He has. And I think Cliff Kingsbury, coming from an air raid, I think people forget. People think air raid, throw the ball, dink and dunk, matriculate your way down the field. If you really understand Cliff Kingsbury, he wants to run the football. He uses air raid concepts, but it's not a full air raid offense. And that's why you've seen the downhill throws to Christian Kirk, the downhill throws to DeAndre Hopkins, what they've done in the run game with James Conner, who has surpassed, I think, a lot of people's expectations coming this year. But I love what they're building there. And I think if you look at Cliff Kingsbury and when he was offered the opportunity after being fired at Texas Tech, and he walks to a head coaching job, there's one reason why Cliff Kingsbury took the job. Cardinals have the #1 draft pick. He recruited Kyler Murray to go to college. Didn't get him. And he said, while he was a college coach, before getting the job with the Arizona Cardinals, he said, if I was an NFL franchise, I would draft Kyler Murray the #1 overall. This was long before he had an opportunity to be a head coach in the NFL. So he knew who he wanted. He got the job. They so happened to have the #1 pick. He takes Kyler Murray. and the guy has done everything he said he could do with a guy like Kyler Murray. So
Right.
the Cardinals are a fun team to watch. You're starting to see Sean McVay have some struggles. I do think losing Robert Woods was big for that offense. Odell Beckham was not going to give you what Robert Woods could. As much as people love the athlete that Odell Beckham is, he's not the guy he was 4 or 5 years ago. Like, he's just not. We got to let that go. He's still figuring it out. He's going to play well in glimpses, but he's not a guy that's going to dominate and get you 11, 12 targets a week, 7 or 8 catches for $125 and a touchdown. He's not. We got to stop thinking he's that guy. He's not.
Yeah. Well, going to be a great game no matter what. Don't you agree? I can't wait.
I can't wait. There's so many great games this weekend. It's going to be a fun week for sure.
Hey, we're going to get into our guest. Can't wait. But before we do, we got a second ad. We've gone from 0 ads to 2 in a week. I think Christmas has come early for my house. I don't know about you. So here we go. We're also sponsored by Thrive Fantasy. This episode of the Cut Podcast Network is sponsored by Thrive Fantasy. Get out there and prop up today. Thrive Fantasy's games concept revolves around player props, simple over and unders on player stats. Choose your lineup of over and unders for top-tier players. Each prop has a fantasy point attached to it that is based on how likely it is to hit. Players with the highest point totals win. We've had a ton of success with the Thrive, and prop betting is the future of fantasy sports. Download Thrive Fantasy on your app store today and use the promo code, most important part for you to get the discount, the code, when making your first deposit. Thrive will instantly match your deposit amount up to $100. Thank you to Thrive Fantasy for sponsoring this episode. Coach, I don't know about you, but I don't do DFS. I don't do a lot of the other stuff, but I do enjoy doing those quick and easy $2, $4, whatever type of bets. You pick 5, those over and unders, and next thing you know, you think you might win. You bet 5 and think you're going to win, $200, $3 bet. I've never fucking hit, but it seems so painless, being so cheap that we can make it. It's always worth the fun just to sweat that out on a Sunday.
I'm with you, man. It just became legal here in Arizona, so I dabble in it a little bit, but not as much as I would like to for obvious reasons. Still trying to figure out how all that works, but we'll figure it out. I mean, guys like at Detroit Beastie, Chris Robbins been on the show. Guys like Jeff Trolls have been on the show, and those are DFS guys that I learned a ton from, that I still pay attention to. At biased_opinions, who's been on the show. I mean, those are all great follows for all your DFS needs. There's a lot more of them, but those guys are absolutely phenomenal for those of you listening.
Hey, we're at the favorite part of the show where people don't have to listen to us talk. We bring on people that we want to try and learn from, because that is ultimately why you and I both went on the Twitter community, is to try and get better at this game. So why don't you tell us about this week's guest?
Hey, so Ralph is absolutely awesome. At Lobos FFDN on Twitter. Got an opportunity to meet with him. Found out he lived out here in Arizona. He's a fellow Cowboy fan. We met up for lunch out here, had an absolute blast. He will be going with us to the Expo, I think, next year. Recently married, one of my favorite follows on Twitter. Ralph, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks, gentlemen. Thanks for having me on. It's Brett. Pleasure to meet you, man. Even though it's virtual, the feeling is great to see you virtually. Coach, good to see you again, brother. We got to do it again, man. It was a good time.
We do, man. We definitely got to get out again for some drinks and wings, brother.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's weird, because I see your stuff come over the timeline, and yes, it's great to meet you personally. And we've never really interacted much, and it's not for any other reason that it just hasn't happened. So thankful that you were able to come on, and we kind of want to dive right into it. First and foremost, why don't you tell us where we can look at your stuff? Tell us where we can find the content that you're giving to the fine people.
Yes, absolutely. So you guys can find most of my stuff at Lobos FFDN. I tweet what's on my mind. I most of the time it's just what's up there. Sometimes there is some information and some statistical crap that goes out, but most of the time I'm tweeting what's on my mind, some opinions. I'm not just speaking out of my ass. I like to put things together before I say them, but just like to have fun with it. And I do write for FF Face Off. Some of the guys there, all the guys are absolutely amazing. That's the platform really where I put most of my work at. So it's it's good to have that. And then obviously I do my weekly alphas, in which it's my version of the stardom. So ESPN's got Matthew Berry doing their stardoms of the week. Lobos FF Den has our weekly stardom. So feel free to follow me. I'm always interacting.
And I'll say this real quick. If you follow him, first of all, he's a great guy. And he's even better in person. But he hits on quite a few of these stardom sit-ins that, the Matthew Berry made famous. But, he talks about the alphas of the week and who he feels is going to have a great week that week. He hits more often than he doesn't. So certainly worth a follow and paying attention to for sure.
Appreciate that, Coach. Absolutely. It's at the end of the year, I'm going to put out some statistics around how often people in the top 5 for my alphas, and it's I'm going to knock on wood because it's looking pretty good so far, but I'm excited about it.
Okay, so we know you're good. So the coach approach, and I mean, just what I'm about in this community is trying to get better. So when I say that's awesome, how'd you do it? What is your process? Are you a guy that is looking at BMI? Are you a guy that's looking at matchups of who's coaching? Are you a guy that is watching a shitload of film? We really kind of want to get into the process part of it. So typically describe how you're coming up with the content that you come up with.
2 things for me. And that's a great question, Brett, because I think a lot of people don't, and everyone's got their different approach, right? I mean, some folks, to your point, look at numbers, they look at those facts. Some folks, like myself, I'm big on film. And Coach, I think you would appreciate that coming that you are a coach, is you're getting most of your work, you're getting your diet, you're getting everything from that film. And for me, that's personally what I get my things from. So Sundays, plop my ass on that couch. I watch Red Zone for 13 hours the way the rest of us do. I'm consistently looking at 5 or 6 game on at the same time. And what I start doing is I've always got my list of alphas. I've got my list of people who I'm looking out on. Obviously, some of those are on my fantasy football team, so I'm invested in those guys, but also start to look outside and say, okay, this guy has been consistently getting increased snap count. Nico Collins is now the wide receiver 2 with the Houston Texans. Ever since he came back from that injury, he's averaging 60% of the snap counts. What's he doing in those snaps? Is he blocking? Is he running routes? What's it looking like? And so what I do is on Sundays, I enjoy football and I'll watch Red Zone for those 13 hours. And I'll jot down a few names that catch my eye. And whether that is, hey, this guy, I saw 3 targets in a row for Brandon Cooks week 2. Now, I knew Brandon Cooks was a bargain from the beginning, but guys like that where I'm like, okay, let's look at film later on. And so Game Pass, NFL Game Pass throughout the week, looking at some of those pieces. So before I put my alphas list together, I'm looking at that game film. I love using Fantasy Pros and also Football Guys. So shout out to both of those platforms for some of their numbers. But I'll start to look at some of the snap counts. I'll look at some of those targets and see what guys are bringing value or rising in value. And I try to go from that. Obviously, don't always hit, but it's worked out.
I think what's interesting about what you're saying, like I know for me, I'll watch a game and there's certain games that I'll tape or games. When I watch a game, I think what's weird is, first of all, I will watch a play. And then I think it's just the coach in me. Like when you're, and I don't want to get to huddle.com, what huddle is, but you watch a game, I'll play it back 4 or 5 or 6 times that same play and look and go, this is why that run concept didn't work. This is what the defense is doing. Are we reading the proper bubbles of space in the run game? Or what is the quarterback seeing in the passing game? And sometimes you're watching games on television, they don't give you an all 22 view, right? Mm-hmm. So it's hard to understand all that. So you have to dig a little bit deeper. But I know for me, it's like I'll watch the same play over and over again 5 or 6 times, or I'll record a game and go back and watch it. Or if there's a game that maybe I'm not vested, I don't have a vested interest in, I don't have fantasy players in that, but they're games I want to watch. Mm-hmm. I'll record it and go back and watch it later and then be able to apply and say, hey, based off this week's matchup and what I'm seeing, I could see player A being a legitimate, an opportunity there to win, whether it's DFS or it's just setting your fantasy lineups. These are guys I like for the upcoming week. So I think it's awesome to hear you talk about. I'm a film guy, obviously, but I love the analytical people. I love analytics too. Get the numbers.
We all do.
At my heart, I'm a film guy, so I can appreciate that for sure.
Well, one of the guys, and I gotta walk out in a second. I got a big delivery coming here in a second. But one of the guys that you've always been high on, and I'm going to talk about why, and that's the Memphis guy.
Boy.
That's your boy. And, I'm a former high school football coach. And I'll tell you what, there's two things that I feel are very relatable in high school football and in fantasy football. And that is, I want to walk out to my first practice and see a stud running back looking me right back out in the face, whether that be my fantasy team or whether that be my high school football team. And so when I would make that opinion based off of two things, first and foremost, size and speed. So as a coach, if that is what I think is pretty damn good, then I don't know how there was many people who did not like what you were getting from Antonio Gibson. So what was it about him that really kind of excited you right from the start?
The very first thing, and I actually tweeted this out, I want to say a month before the season started, and it was a thread on Antonio Gibson on why he could be a top 5 back. And I think, Coach, one of the times you even asked me, like, dude, who do you have ahead of Gibson and I guess below Gibson to have him as a top 5? And the guys that I had above him were Austin Eckler, Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, and CMC. Now, obviously, injuries, CMC and Saquon, there it is. But Eckler, awesome to have him up there. Awesome to see that. I've been a big Eckler fan all offseason too.
Yeah, me too.
My other guy, absolutely, man. But when it came to that, when I tweeted that thread, there was a couple things. And the first one was obviously drafted as a wide receiver. The immediate transition to running back led me to believe, obviously, he's a big guy. They see something in that running back. They see he's quick, he's agile. And in his rookie season, he had, I want to say it was a total of 3 tackles for loss the entire season on 181 carries, I believe, which was, to me, the very first sign of running backs are supposed to go forward. Zeke's first couple years in the NFL, he was averaging 5 yards a carry, 5.5. Every time he touched the ball, he's falling forward. He's going forward. And I saw the same thing in Gibby. And I really, really like that. And obviously that transitional period where I thought he was going to continue to excel was as a receiver, they were focusing so heavily on showing him the routes and the ins and the outs of a running back that I thought season 2, he'd actually see a lot of more receptions. That's kind of where I've been a little bummed. He hasn't been really utilized in the passing game because of McKissick, but I saw that, and I obviously saw the potential there, but I knew they'd lean on him as a runner. And obviously right now he's already 30 more carries than he did all of last year, which is really exciting to see. My projections for him, I was off so far. I've been off by about 30 yards on his projections, and on his receptions, I'm down about 15 receptions. But with McKissick out, he may actually get to my projections. So I've been big on him. I think that wide receiver skill that he has from college is going to help him, not just this year, but moving forward. And obviously the big hype around him this offseason was, can he play that CMC type role? CMC is a completely different running back. And Gibson's bigger. He's stronger.
He's 6'2", 220. That's a big dude.
It's a big dude. He's bigger than
more typical what you envision a tailback being.
Yeah. And
I think what's interesting about Antonio Gibson that people forget, of course, Tony Pollard, Antonio Gibson, right? I mean, Memphis guys, but
Henderson.
Yeah. I think what's interesting is about Antonio Gibson is people talk about volume, and it's like with people want to go back and say, well, he was a college wide receiver that transitioned to running back. Why is he not doing more in the passing game? And I think what's crazy is if you look at McKissick from a catch rate percentage and what he's doing in that offense, he's actually been playing better than Antonio Gibson. I think that's where I know I was wrong going to the offseason, because I felt like coming into 2021, you're going to see Gibson now. McKissick was a big part of their season in 2020, but I felt like with Gibson, he'll get more of the snap share. He's going to get more of the receiving game. He's a former wide receiver that transitioned to running back. And we haven't seen that to the degree that we would like. And I think some of that's because of pass pro and what's going on there. And McKissick continues to deliver on third down situations in the passing game. It's affected Antonio Gibson. But now that McKissick's been hurt, you're starting to see Antonio Gibson get that volume and what he can do. Sometimes a guy just needs that opportunity.
Yep.
Give me that opportunity to be an alpha, to steal your terminology there, to be an alpha and be involved not just in the run game, but also in the passing game, and what I can do with that type of volume.
Yep.
And now you're seeing Antonio Gibson prove he's absolutely an alpha. And I love the skill set that he has. I see sometimes people want to compare Tony Pollard to Antonio Gibson. Tony Pollard's not Antonio Gibson.
Different. He's
not. So stop the comparison. 6'2", 220 versus 6', 200. It's a little bit of a difference. I'll take Antonio Gibson all day long in that scenario.
Yeah. And it's funny because Gibson, he's running back 11, and he had that shin injury for the first 8 weeks of the season. And you look at that, and obviously the last 4 games, he's averaging 27 touches a game, which that's the volume exactly that I figured he would get in that offense. And obviously, even before Heineke, which I love Heineke. I heard you guys talking about Heineke right before this, and he's one of my favorites. Just it's hard not to root for the guy. But
I agree.
When it was Ryan Fitzpatrick, we saw those dump offs last year. It made Myles Gaskin famous. Gaskin literally was getting a ton of receptions last year, and I thought it's going to be a similar impact in Washington, whether it was McKissick or Gibson. But it's been exciting. He fits that offense. He fits the way that the Washington football team really plays the game. I mean, they beat the Buccaneers by literally just holding the ball for the last 10 minutes of the fourth quarter. And
their time of possession has been outstanding.
Yeah, absolutely. So he fits that offense perfectly. He's moving forward. If he's on your team for fantasy football, he could take you to victory. He's a big guy, and he's got the right style for it.
Here's the thing: there's just not a lot of guys out there. There's not a lot of true. I'm an old guy. I'm used to NFL teams having one guy that they feed exclusively, and you could be okay getting the RB15. Well, the RB15 isn't the RB15 of 1995 anymore. And so, if you got Antonio Gibson and you've got the future that he should have, I mean, you got to be pretty happy.
Yeah.
I think what's interesting about, we talk about touches for running backs, and we knew when the league expanded to a 17-game schedule, you were going to see teams not give guys that 25 to 30 touches per game. You're going to, you're kind of dispersed. And so you saw a lot of teams go to a 1A and a 1B running back and more committee type approaches, even with Zeke Elliott. Now he's had a knee injury lately, the last 4 or 5 games, but even prior to that, they were like, hey, he's had a lot of wear and tear over the last, 4 or 5 years in the NFL. He's won 2 rushing titles. Zeke's not the guy that's going to give you 25, 35 carries per game. He's going to give you 20 to 22, 23, but we want to use Tony Pollard as a great complement in that offense. You're seeing more teams do that. Is Antonio Gibson have the skill set to give you alpha touches? Yes, he does, but you have J.D. McKissick. Why not use that? So you're seeing teams save guys, and it's all about making a playoff push. At the end of the day, teams don't care about what we want to do in fantasy football. It's about winning football games, winning the Super Bowl. So they're gonna curtail the touches, the Derrick Henrys and the old Walter Paytons and the Emmitt Smiths back in the day and the Zeke Elliott's early in his career. You just have very few Jonathan Taylors, and the alphas are going to get that type of volume week in and week out. You're seeing more of a running back by committee, and I think Antonio Gibson's just done a phenomenal job, and I'm excited to see what that guy does in the future of football.
Yeah.
It's funny that you mentioned Jonathan Taylor, and he's someone that I wanted to also bring up. And I'm such a, last year, let's just go back to the whole debate, CEH or Jonathan Taylor type of situation that everybody went through. And you're smiling because I, for one, got caught up in landing spot. Not that Jonathan Taylor's landing spot was terrible, but landing spot for CEH seemed to be incredible. And when you have a guy like Damian Williams do what he did in a limited role prior to CEH, I think there was a lot of reason to be excited about that. But based off of talent, it should have always been Jonathan Taylor. And talent, it's a great example of talent really kind of winning out.
Yeah. I was always big on Taylor and watching and just literally watching him play in college at Wisconsin. He was another beast. And I think the thing that people were scared about of him converting over to fantasy football in the NFL was some of his receiving abilities, right? I think he had less than 40 catches throughout his college career. And I'd love if I'm going to fact check myself on that actually, but
no, you're not right. You don't need to, don't worry about it, but it's right around.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure he had less than that. And I think that's where people were concerned is that going to convert over? And obviously, like Coach, to your point, we've seen guys with their fantasy potential get capped because of their receiving abilities not being there. And it's funny, but the guy had 3 2,000-yard rushing seasons. And people were doubting that. And when I saw him slip to the second round, it was a shock to me. And obviously the Colts got a steal with that, but I could have sworn he was going to be that number one guy. And he was my target in all my dynasty leagues. I heard you guys talking about dynasty earlier too. So
Yeah.
he was my target in all dynasty leagues because he was just a beast.
Yeah, I think that's the thing about Jonathan Taylor that people forget is I think there was some concerns with the volume usage he had at Wisconsin coming into the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, look, the technology nowadays in terms of what these guys do to prepare for volume and what these guys do in terms of preparation is I think you forget. Jonathan Taylor, by far, was the RB1 in that draft class. And so, like you said, coming in, second round was very surprising. But you land up in an offense with a Quentin Nelson, the offensive line that the Colts have, and now what they've done, bringing Carson Wentz in, reuniting him with Frank Reich in Indianapolis, I think it's absolutely phenomenal. You're talking about a guy right now that has just been absolutely outstanding. You look at his last, he's had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games over 100 yards. Mm-hmm. And in his last, 5 games, he's 4 out of 5 games. He's been over 100 yards. He's hit 172, 185, and 143.
There's no one else like that.
Come on. I mean, you can talk about Derrick Henry and where he was at, but if you take Derrick Henry and Jonathan Taylor and give them the same volume from week 1 to week 17, I will take Jonathan Taylor every single time.
Absolutely.
It's good stuff. And that brings up our next topic. Our next topic is the Scott Fish Bowl because here we are, week 14. I'm in the playoffs at 8-5.
Don't do it.
Well, I don't have Jonathan Taylor was my second round pick. I picked 14 or 15, somewhere around there. And he's out this week because they're on bye. But what a hell of experience Scott Fish Bowl has been. I don't know about you, but the group 1.07 Twitter chat group has been incredible. The whole experience. This is my first year. I know it's Coach Bruce's. I don't know if you've probably been in a bunch, but it's been a hell of a lot of fun. How are you guys doing in it?
It was my first year this year, and I got accepted. I want to say it was like a week before. I thought I wasn't going to make it. I had already accepted it. I put together a league with a bunch of other guys who had applied for it and didn't get in. It was a mental health awareness league that I put together along with Matt Daniel over there. Awesome guy. We put it together. We were raising money for mental health. I am very big on that.
But we'll talk more about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Me too.
And winner of that will get a signed DJ Moore jersey. And we put everything together, and come to find out, literally a week prior, I get that email. I'm in, and it was fantastic. And not to mention, I was in Ryan McDowell's league, who helps Scott. Yeah, who literally helped Scott with it. And it was a tough division. Right. I mean, he made it to the playoffs. I missed it by 1. I missed playoffs by 1. I was crushed by injuries this year and terrible quarterback play. My QB1 was Josh Allen, but I had Daniel Jones and Zach Wilson. So
that's you right there, Coach Bruce.
Yeah, hey, it's so funny. You're preaching to the choir here, man. So I went into the Scott Fish Bowl draft, and that's my first year as well. And you're in Ryan McDowell's league. I'm in Scott Fish's league. So awesome. I got a chance to meet him at the expo. The guy's absolutely amazing. Everybody knows that. But what's really cool was I went to the draft going, all right, I'm at the 1.06. I'm going to get Dak Prescott. If you look at how the defense played last year, I didn't see as big of an improvement from 2022 to what they did, or 2021 to 2020. I feel like Dak was going to have to be that offense. We're going to have to throw the ball a lot, high volume. And then he got picked at 1.05 right in front of him. So 5 quarterbacks in a row. And I went, at that point, CMC still on the table. I'm taking CMC. Round 2 comes, I'm taking Jonathan Taylor, and I get Jonathan Taylor. So now I'm like, okay, I'm going to wait on quarterback. So I went wide receiver. Finally got a quarterback, and I ended up with Carson Wentz, Daniel Jones, and Zach Wilson.
Yep. But
here we are, and I wasn't thinking at the time. I'm like, I didn't realize the playoffs started in week 14. I know it was posted. I know I should have known, but I wasn't paying attention to that. So now I have Jonathan Taylor on a bye week. A.J. Brown is out. I took Michael Thomas in the 12th round. Thought I was going to get great value. He's out. Now I have a bye week this week with Carson Wentz, Jonathan Taylor are out. So I'm like, Daniel Jones has a neck injury.
Ooh.
I get one quarterback. I make the playoffs, and I have to start freaking Zach Wilson. That's all I got at quarterback. So my
But you
team
know what? We need
is screwed going to round one of the playoffs. I don't even know who I'm playing yet. I haven't looked. And I'm like, I'm hitting the waiver wire, trying to figure it out. I'm like, I'm screwed in week one of the playoffs. But hey, it is what it is.
But what a great cause. What a great event.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun. Hey, one of the questions I wanted to ask you, and this relates more to Dynasty, or not necessarily, it could be about redraft as well, but any guys in 2022 that, maybe a guy like Pat Fryermuth or whoever that you see, did I pick one of your guys the way you're smiling, but that could really expand on what he's done this year and be someone that we want to target in 2022?
Yeah, I smile with that, Brett, because Muth was one of my guys for this year. And
Me
I know
too.
that tight ends usually don't contribute year one. I know that, all that shit. But hear me out. On my Scott Fishbowl team, just to go back to that, and then I'll go right back to my 2022, I have Muth, I got Elijah Mitchell, I got Jalen Waddle, and then I had, it was Frick on the wide receiver and Elijah Moore. So a lot of those guys, yeah. So
all great picks.
Yeah, I mean, crap. If it was a dynasty league, I'd be set. But it was funny, and that's why. Yeah, I mean, I think Muth is a big one. I think going into 2022, if Tony can stay healthy, I think that's a guy I'm targeting in both redraft and dynasty. People are low on him because of the quarterback situation. I think a lot of people are iffy. Obviously, the guy can't seem to stay healthy.
I'm sorry, can I interrupt?
Yeah.
All I heard was Tony. Were you referring to Kadarius Tony?
Kadarius Tony,
Yeah,
yes.
I figured he was, yeah.
Yeah. So just based on Tony and based on the production, when that guy touches the ball, he reminds me of a Tyreek Hill. He really seems just very agile. I know he's not in size-wise, doesn't compare to Tyreek Hill, but he just seems like he is greased up. He seems like he's got butter all over and he's impossible to bring down. I'm excited about what's going to happen in New York next year. I don't know what the quarterback situation will bring. Obviously, Daniel Jones is not the answer there, so I'm curious to what that is. But he is a playmaker. Clearly, Galladay is not the guy there. He's got a chance next year to kind of put something together as soon as the Giants can put something together. But Tony's one of those guys, and I don't know how you guys feel about him, but I think he looks elusive. He looks like that first round pick that the Giants.
It's funny you asked me what we thought, so I'm going to go ahead and tell you. And that is that going into the year, I read so many negative things about him going into camp. I read so many negative things about him in camp. I heard so many things. I'm not an analytical guy, but a lot of my analytical people that I trust were talking about late this or this and that, took him forever to break out, and things that I really don't know anything about. But when it comes, I'm all about value. So in Dynasty, if I'm in a rookie draft and he was next guy up, I took him, and I took him in a few leagues. So with that being said, I've been pleasantly surprised when he's been given an opportunity. I mean, he put up against Dallas Cowboys one time this year. He was over 100.
Easy.
I'm not surprised, but he put up
Yeah.
He put up a great game. And so that was something that I think, as a former high school football coach, the thing you always want to look for is someone you can get the ball to who can make plays on their own. And he showed in that game that he didn't need a lot to create a big play. And when you do that and you do it at the NFL level, I'm right there with you. I think that's a great call.
Yeah.
I think here's the downside to it too, is you look at and look, Daniel Jones, jury's still out. We can talk about whether he's the right guy in that offense or not. But I think with the Kadarius Toney is if you have an offensive coordinator that can scheme a guy like that in space and say, look, on 3rd and 7, I can throw it to him in 4 yards and I can rely on him to break a tackle and get a first down for me. You can't do that with every receiver. And so I think it's fun. Like you talk about guys I think could break out in 2022. I think Michael Gallup's another guy you could look at and go, hey, if he ends up in the right situation, right, in an offense where he can be a potential wide receiver 1 or even 2, whereas right now he's a wide receiver 3 in Dallas, That's a guy that could have a nice breakout in 2022. But I do like the pick of Tony. I didn't love his landing spot in New York because of Daniel Jones and what they're doing offensively. But I also feel like, hey, there's a guy that in the right system with the right offensive coordinator and the right quarterback, Kadarius Toney could be a guy that could be really, really good. And everybody laughed at the Giants when they made the pick. But we'll see how that plays out. But I do love Michael Gallup in 2022 as well. I'm a huge Pat Freiermuth guy as well. I was big on him. I've got a ton of shares of him, and I think he's going to be a difference maker for sure.
And what else? You got another one for us?
I do have another one. It's so going into the year, there was, and obviously I was very hyped on him, but he fits the gameplay perfectly. And I mean, even this year, Minnesota knows how to lose. If they know how to do one thing, it's they know how to lose. And I saw that. And if they can make Tyler Conklin look decent, Irv Smith Jr. was my breakout tight end of the year this year. I drafted him in Scott Fishbowl. I love his speed. I love his size. I mean, he fits that offense perfectly. And who knows if they get rid of Shermer? Who knows what happens in Minnesota this year? And I mean, after this year, but I mean, he's still a super young guy, super athletic. I think if Minnesota can stick to somewhat of their game plan, and like I said, if Conklin looks good, I think next year we finally see a little bit of Irv Smith if he can stay healthy, because he's exciting to watch. He was dynamic in college, and I'm excited about him. But if there's one guy who I'm hoping for next year and buying low on, especially from a dynasty perspective, it's Irv Smith. I mean, I bought him in one of my dynasty leagues for a third, for a 2022 third, and I said, you know what, I'll take that. So
for that, I agree.
Yeah.
And I might be bitter because I was like you coming into the season, and I have so many shares. And there's an analyst that I trust a lot, and they always talk about you can't forget what they've done since they've been here. Yeah. And what Irv Smith has done since he's been here hasn't been a lot, unfortunately. And whether it be because of system in Minnesota, because a lot of people point to that, or whatever. But despite that, I looked at the things that he possesses, his skill set, his pedigree coming from Alabama, and I was right there with you. But holy crap, I'm sitting here in a lot of leagues and a lot of startup drafts last year where that was my number one tight end, and now I'm thinking I got lucky 4 rounds later and got an Adam Troutman, and he's done nothing. And now I'm really hurting at that position because I put a lot of faith in Irv Smith. And so because of that, I wish him well because I still have him, and I'm not going to give him away for more than probably a second rounder. But I worry about him, and just because he hasn't done it yet.
Yeah, I'm a big Irv Smith guy too, and I've got a ton of shares of him as well coming this year. I felt like in the Minnesota offense as being the alpha with Kyle Rudolph moving on to the New York Giants, I felt like there's going to be a great opportunity for him.
It was all set up.
Yeah, so I don't believe in injury prone. I think some guys are just unlucky. But, this is one of those years where it was an opportunity for him to be a breakout guy, and it didn't work out due to injury. But I'm a big believer. Hey, look, he's a young guy. Mm-hmm. He's a very young guy. And the skill set is certainly there. So I think when you have
I'm just like, it was like a bad first date, and I haven't gotten over it.
But you got to look like this. When you have an Adam Thielen as that possession receiver, great in the red zone, you have a Justin Jefferson that can run everything in the route tree, and then you add an Irv Smith who can work that underneath stuff in the middle of the field. Yeah. From an offensive perspective, as a former offensive coordinator, you're like, God, there's so many things we can do with the tools we have. And now with the rise of a KJ Osborne, if they do move on from Thielen as an example, KJ Osborne's a guy that could break out in 2022 as well. A lot of people are talking about. So
big time.
Yeah, I like what Minnesota's doing. You just got to get – can Kirk Cousins win it in prime time, and can he get you in the playoffs? And as of right now, no. But
I'll say one last guy, and then we can move on. And it's one other guy that I preached on the entire offseason, which was a miss on my part, I will say, thus far this year. But his targets have doubled over the last 3 weeks. He's been targeted as the wide receiver 2 and has ran more routes than the wide receiver 3 on that team, which is Cole Beasley. Yeah. My number one guy, one of the big guys I preached this offseason, Gibby was my number 1. Gabriel Davis was my number 2. If anyone here follows me and know me, if you hear Gabriel Davis, you don't think about me, I'm doing it wrong, because I could have sworn he was going to be that wide receiver 2 behind Diggs in Buffalo. It was interesting, kind of. I mean, game 1, week 1, he catches that touchdown. I'm like, I hit it. I hit the lottery. I did it. I called it, and his usage kind of was down a little bit, and but over the last 3 games, it's picked up quite a bit. He has seen, I want to say, at least it's either 4 or 5 targets last couple games. He's gotten a touchdown in those games. He's looking good. It's looking better. Sanders is gone next year. Cole Beasley turns 34 next year, 33 next year. We start to see a little bit of wear and tear on that, and I think next year, I'm going to keep saying it until it happens, but next year Gabriel Davis will be that wide receiver 2 in Buffalo. So
I like that. I like it and I don't like it, because he's a lot like Irv Smith. And I only say that because I had so much expectations because I was like you. I must have got him in my dynasty drafts 2 years ago at incredible value for me to get him. And B, once I got him and he puts up, 7 or 8 touchdowns as a rookie and not a lot of target, and he was doing this and that. But for him to come out the way that he did this year, it was an obvious concern. And man, I'm finding it harder and harder the more invested I get in like being my own analyst or coming up with my own like conclusions, to be loyal as long as I used to, I guess. And so I hope you're right, but he's another guy like Irv Smith, where Gabriel Davis, I just kind of like throw up a little bit because I expected more, but maybe my expectations were too high for a guy who was drafted in the 5th round anyways. If we get a number 2 receiver in that offense with a quarterback like, Allen for the next 10 years, I should have nothing to complain about.
I agree.
I'm going to give you guys one fact. That's all you need to know. So we talked about Gabriel Davis. We talked about Cole Beasley and where they're at with Emmanuel Sanders, how they're going to move on from that. So Gabriel Davis instantly becomes that number 2 outside of Stephon Diggs. Right now you have Dawson Knox, what they're doing there at tight end position. There's a lot of opportunity there in that offense. But the main factor for Gabriel Davis, why I think he's going to be could be a breakout in 2022. We have the same birthday. He's an April Fool's baby. So
there you go.
I mean, that right there.
He's a fellow.
Is that deep analytics or what?
He's a fellow Aries. I didn't know you were an Aries, Coach.
April Fool's Day. Right?
We're all Aries.
Look at that. The stars are.
We didn't know that. That's funny.
The stars are in Gatorade. This is perfect.
April Fool's Day, man. April 1st, bro. Now, granted, it was 25 years prior to Gabriel Davis, but we're not talking about that.
I'm a tax day baby, so April 15th. It's perfect.
Oh, there you go. So is my ex-wife, but I won't hold that against you.
As you shouldn't.
If you're getting a return back, it's okay to be born on April 15th. If you're having a kid, it's not a kid.
I have a bad taste in my mouth for both those reasons, tax day and Herbert, whatever. Hey, man, I'll tell you what. Like I said earlier, we never really interacted, but I have nothing but respect. The guys that I like to follow are the ones that I feel like are grinding and trying to do something, A, for themselves, and B, that allows people like me who are trying to learn an opportunity to learn. But more importantly, there's no drama with you. There's no getting involved in, there's no pissing contests. And if that offends anybody for saying pissing contests, I apologize. But my point is that I can follow you knowing that the content I'm going to get is from you. And more importantly, there's no bullshit. There's just the work that you put into it and you gave it to us. So thank you so much for that. And thank you for coming on the show tonight. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, anytime, guys. It was a pleasure being on. As soon as Coach texted me a few months back and said, hey, we'd love to have you, I said, I'd love to be on, man. Whenever you guys need it, I'm always down for a football chat. Yeah, I mean, I should have started with that. It would have been.
Right.
You should have. So here's what's great. So
I never said that. So congratulations. Marriage is the group.
Yes.
Whatever happened.
For sure. But what's really cool is
I've done it 3 times. It's the best.
Yeah. First time's always practice, bro, except for you.
Yeah, right.
But I think what's really cool is, so Brett and I have talked a lot since we started the coach approach about what a blast I had at the expo last year and how now Brett's going to come with me this following year. We're going to figure out how to meet up. You're obviously based in Arizona. I'm based in Arizona, so the invite's there. You and I have talked about it. We're all going to head up. We're going to get an Airbnb and do it right up in Ohio and do the expo next year. So
I'm there, brother. I'm there.
all right, man. Hey, appreciate having you on the show, man. You absolutely killed it. I had an absolute blast. I'm sure Brett and I could talk football with you all night, man.
Yeah, I'm here for it. You guys know where to tweet me. Again, any questions, anything you guys need, always here for it at Lobos FF Den. And you guys are both alphas, man. Keep it up.
Appreciate you. Coach Bruce, I can't tell you enough. So thankful that you're getting through COVID, and so thankful that we didn't miss a show. And you're my hero for handling it all. And I'll see you again next week, brother.
All right, man. Take care, guys.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.